I'm Maria from Pax8 Academy, and I'm here with James, also from Pax8 Academy. We're going to be talking about making the most of owner-led sales today.
It's a fun topic, isn't it, Maria?
It is, and it's something that a lot of business owners struggle with, when to hire their first sales rep, and are they ready to hire a sales rep? Every business owner has done sales when they've launched their business to start off with. But
it's
sorry,
it's a dirty word, isn't it? In
sales
this industry. Yeah,
absolutely.
This is what stops so many people from focusing on it and leveraging it. I think most of the owners won't ever tell you that they're actually doing sales. They'll be very proud of, we run our business, we've grown it on organic leads, and no, we don't sell to our client. But there's a lot of functions in there, even if you're not directly out there chasing new leads and doing the hunting part, you're selling. Everything that you're doing is selling. And I think it's important to stop getting caught up in the sales is a dirty word and it's a strange world, and actually embrace it, because it's so important to the business. I'd contend that it's probably the second most important part of any business, aside from accounts reconciliation and actually collecting the cash for the work that you've done. And if you're not doing any of those selling components, then you're missing out on a lot of opportunity, not helping your clients, and you're not able to grow the business and generate more profit from it. So I thought we'd jump on and talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think you've come from the sales background, haven't you?
I have come from a sales background in various levels of the channel. So working at a vendor and working in the technology service provider world, and also now in the distribution space. So, all levels of the channel. But I think the important part with talking to business owners about sales is, as you said, they'll often say, oh, no, I don't sell. Customers come to me. I get referrals from my clients. So I'm not selling. There's still a process behind that. And if an owner is going to, make the most of their sales, they need to know what that process is. And they need to structure that process, because that's where they'll learn what's working and what's not working. Because if you ask most business owners who are the salesperson in their business, and you say, tell me about your pipeline, tell me about your sales and why you lose sales, they can't tell you the answer behind that.
Well, they don't lose sales because they've got really high conversion rates. Because we only remember the wins. It's a bit like gambling. We remember all the times we've won, but we've forgotten all the times we've lost, the things that didn't go right. And quite often at this sort of level that we're talking about, most of the time we don't have the volumes either, because we're not actually driving anything. We're waiting for everything to come to us. So the volumes are always going to be a lot less. There's a unique position from being a owner of the business, is you're actually the best person to sell what you're doing, because you know it. And while you don't have a lot of processes, you don't have a lot of structure, you're the one that can talk to it, and that passion comes across. If you're deeply caring about the client outcomes, it comes across. You don't replicate that easily by hiring a salesperson under you.
No, absolutely not. I agree with that. That passion is, the owners are the best people to sell the services, the products, whatever your business is running. But if you start documenting those processes, in with that you can document the why behind, why are we selling this way? And in doing that, when you look to hire a salesperson, that can come across, because that's all been designed. and it's all been documented and it's all recorded.
How much of the sales operations or sales in general do you think is process driven opposed to the actual sales art of it? Like science versus art. This is why a lot of owners struggle in sales, is because it feels so intangible. You can't just go get a ticket, solve the problem, and close the ticket. It appears to be not as simple as that.
We've all heard the phrase people buy from people. People buy from people that they like. So there is obviously an element of relationship building in the sales process. That is a given. But if there's a clear process behind it, it makes the relationship building easier. As a salesperson, if I was working, starting at a company and there's a clear process behind it, I can go in there with confidence, knowing that I'm selling a product and a process that is going to help the customer, the client, in the long run. Without that process, even as an owner, I mean, would you question, I'm going to sell managed services to my clients. I've got a team of techs that are going to do a great job. Have you got the whole process to make sure the end-to-end onboarding of the customer, the billing, that's all should all be included in the sales process, because that makes the customer happy. From the moment you start talking to the customer to the moment that they are fully onboarded and running with your tech team, that's part of the sales process. And if any of that has a hiccup, that's what they'll remember, and they'll blame the person who sold it to them. And then that relationship falls down. So you need the relationship, that's really key, but then you also need the science behind it. It's a tricky role because it needs both.
And this is where I think for owners as well is reason why a lot of us suck at selling, at selling in general, apart from the mindset of we don't really want to be salespeople, is we don't actually have the confidence to do it because we don't have repeatable things. So we go into each sale treating it as a brand new shiny thing that we have to do everything completely different. But as you get more volume and you're more deliberate about it, it becomes more repeatable. I'll use my example of when I was doing owner-led sales in my trade services company. Every quote I did was the same process over and over again, even though it was me as an owner. The flair I could put on is the art part was different when I was working with different types of people. So the whole component of when I showed up to a client's, a potential client's doorstep, it was starting from there. How am I going to handle this quote? And it was always the same process each time. I'd understand who they are, understand what the problem was, get them to show me through it, ask them what they're trying to achieve by getting it fixed or having it changed, giving them an estimate, and then providing a proposal to sign off. And it was the same steps over and over. Now that sort of applies to what we're doing, you know, what I've done in MSPs, what I've done inside C-level as well. There's a cadence that you typically go through, and whether it's the exact 100% checklist after checklist, dot point after dot point, probably not, but it's still understanding what's the information that I need to get, what are the client's problems, or with the right person to fit, and being able to break it down into items that need to be checked off and understood before we progress in certain phases of the sales process.
Yeah, I think one of the issues is when we say sales process, or we say a step-by-step repeatable process, people automatically think scripts, and nobody likes it. Everybody, I was dealing with a phone company recently and getting irate because They were clearly reading from a script. No matter what I said, the scripted response was coming out. We're not talking scripts. We're talking personalizing the relationship with the customer. But if the checklist says you're going to include various information in your quote, then you include that in your quote. It doesn't mean that you respond to the customer with the same thing you said to the last customer because you've got a script. And I think that's where people get stuck in the how do we processize sales, and then they get caught up on that and say everybody hates being put in the same bucket.
It's a very important component. It's if there's people interaction, we should have guidelines. If there's the minutiae of function to function and things being put in the system, that's the process. And I think it's important where a lot of people go wrong as well is you are an owner-led sales organization, whether you like it or not. You meld all the sales functions together and treat them as all one blob of things that just happen. And that's where you start getting issues with being able to hire anyone else on. I'm sure we'll talk about that deeper in another time. But if we're treating this all as one thing, then that's where we start falling apart. So how we treat our flow from lead generation to lead capture through to then the qualification steps, through to then the proposal and the closing, through to account management, through to inside sales, through to sales support. They're all individual components and they all have their individual processes and they all have their individual part to play in the flow from a brand new client that doesn't know who you exist to right through to that long-standing client with great relationships. And that's
and
a good place to start.
Any size business can start this. So from the one-man bands all the way up to, larger MSPs where the owner is still leading the sales component, but they've got a whole team behind them. It starts with breaking down what the steps are within your company, and they're going to be the same across every organization. But if you're talking an IT provider who is a sole trader, no employees, and they are selling the services and then delivering the services, it's still got a process. There's still steps. So there's, how did the lead come in? Did they call you? Did you employ a marketing company? Where did it come from? How did you manage that lead to get them to say, yes, we'll meet with you. Yes, we'll sign a contract. What were the steps in that component? Once they signed the contract, you then have to onboard them. You have to make sure they're in your billing system. All of those components that whole step-by-step needs to be documented and worked out. And you don't need a fancy PSA. You don't need a system behind you if you're not ready for it. A spreadsheet will do, as long as the process and the timelines are documented. I mean, things like lead generation, obviously, where are your leads coming from is really crucial. Where are you, because if you don't know where they're coming from, how can you get more? Or how can you look at different avenues? If all your leads are coming from referrals, that's a really good business, but it would be great to figure out a way that you can get more referrals, or maybe you can get leads, cold leads. That's a whole avenue that you're not getting at all. But if you aren't keeping track of where they're coming from, how do you grow it?
Well, that's the challenge that I see with a lot of owner-led sales. If you're already thinking sales is a dirty word, everything that we've just said sounds like a whole heap of work, no matter how simplified you do it, which it can be. Like if you're a small company, just starting by doing like a mud map of the main steps that need to be covered as a client goes through the process. That's already a process. Like you've already documented or way more steps than you ever have.
But don't even think of it as a sales process. Think of it as helping your customers come on board comfortably. That's all it is. I mean, really, and if you don't get them as a customer, there was something wrong in that, in there, and so you refine it. And that's all it is. It's a comfortable onboarding process.
And utilizing the natural curiosity that a lot of us MSP owners have on the technical side, like what you just said, Maria, where did it go wrong and why is an important thing. And a lot of us, because we're not prioritizing sales in the first place, it's always our afterthought. Often it's us as owners ourselves, and there's a place that I always like to start when I'm talking to an owner about their business and sales is, do you actually want to grow? Because it's the biggest inhibitor to successful sales in the first place. If you have an attitude of, no, I don't really want to add anything and I'm comfortable where we are, nothing's going to change. No matter, even if you write down all the processes and put the effort in to do that, it's going to fall back onto attitude as well. And you just won't follow the process. You will skip steps again because you don't really care. And this is what leads into the issues that we have in a lot of MSPs as well. It's like if we don't have a bit of a map of our process, firstly, we're probably not winning as much as we could, or we're not generating as much opportunity, more importantly, that we should. The second problem is if we don't have a process, we have no consistency of the types of clients we're bringing on, and everything's different every time. So we get excited because we've got a referral, and then we'll because we don't have a process and a consistent way of onboarding our clients and more importantly, qualifying who's a fit for us, we end up taking whoever is there at the time because we're excited that someone's there. And it all comes down to we're being reactive. So if we're not self-sabotaging ourselves, we're being very reactive in the way that we're handling and dealing with clients, because often the MSP owners doing the account management and VCIO work with clients, existing clients. They get this new thing out of the blue, no process. So then it's just race through things, skip steps, have to react quickly because maybe we haven't got a proposal template. So we've delayed it 2 weeks. The prospect's like banging down the door because they trust us and they feel good. So we need to spend time writing it. It's all these little components that add up into a lot of issues where we can streamline them quite easily. None of this is rocket science either.
I always say to people, the greatest sales company in the world is McDonald's. And they got there not because their food is amazing. They got there because their processes are impeccable and they are constantly refining them. They are constantly assessing them and refining them and coming up with new ways to do things better. And it's all down to that. They've got an unbelievable process management system behind them, and every new employee is taught from scratch everything. So you come in there and they're like, this is how we change the bin liner at McDonald's, because it's all part of the process. We do it this way, and then they explain it to the new employees. And we do it this way so that we don't leak bin juice, because then our customers are unhappy. And it also causes other problems because then somebody has to get a mop and somebody has to clean the floor. And that's where we need to think about what we're delivering to clients. If we have a process, and as I said, think of it as onboarding, but it's that complete end to end. I mean, if you sell a service and then they're not onboarded properly, they're not going to think that they weren't onboarded properly. They were going to think that they weren't told the truth as part of the sales process. If you sell, even if it's an existing customer, and you say to them, oh, I've got this great new widget that will solve all of these problems that we've been talking about, but then the quote takes too long because you haven't got your quoting process down pat, or once they agree to buy it, the process for the next step of getting that out to the client is not in place. They walk away with a bad taste in their mouth. You need to have that entire process, and then that all needs to fit in with whatever else is happening. So then the billing and you have to think of the customer at each end of the experience, and as the owner, you're responsible for making sure it gets all the way through.
It's such an important perspective that you brought up with the client experience, and thinking about it end to end. Where I see most people falling down in the sales area, again, apart from sales isn't a dirty word, let's change mindset, is because we don't think about the end in mind. We don't understand what are we trying to achieve from the activities that we're trying to do. And this is one advantage inside MSPs with owner-led sales is we've got control of the end-to-end, but also the great majority of MSP owners really care about the outcomes for their clients. So we need to understand what the outcomes we're trying to drive and then feed into consistency and structure to make it happen. What I often come across because of the reactiveness of owners, and like I said before, everything's starting from scratch and reinventing the wheel is where most of the problems come from. So what you mentioned there around existing clients and selling them a project and then not being able to deliver, it's often because we haven't created a consistent method. Like there's a reason why a lot of MSP clients go and price shop, and it's often not to do with money. It's so they can get their stuff quicker than what the MSP can deliver. They're trying to deliver by deadlines. Billing, a lot of people have issues with once it gets up to invoicing, clients querying it, it's because we haven't actually set out what we're delivering and we've left all this openness and vagueness. And it's all a piece of that flow. But if you step back and then look at it end to end, again, it doesn't need to be super, super detailed to start with. At least you know all the key components, who's responsible for them, what are the things that need to go right on the client side and internally. There's your starting point, and then you can get better and better as you go.
I mean, we all love knowing what's going on, and as so do our clients. But we've been talking about this from the client perspective of buying the product or buying the service, but it's just as important internally. If we have those processes and everyone internally within the organization knows what happens where and what the next stage of that sales journey is, everyone's across that process, it supports internally. It makes workflow easier, it makes allocation of time easier, and ultimately everyone's happier. Be it staff or the owner. If the owner knows what their next steps are, then the customer gets a better experience, but the whole process within the MSP runs a lot smoother, and it saves everybody time, makes more money for the MSP.
And this is that trust thing, like especially if we focus on the existing client bases, because let's be honest, most MSPs aren't going to get flooded with leads, especially the smaller ones. You've got to put in a lot of effort and activity to drive that new business. But there's often a lot of opportunity in the existing client base to leverage. And no one's better suited to leveraging that than the owner. You've already got the trust and relationship with clients. So if you've got these processes that are getting better with delivery and consistency, the clients trust you more and more. They already typically trust your advice. They're not going to be engaged with you if they're that cynical that you don't know what you're doing. Yes, you occasionally get those really bad clients that are like that, but the majority of small businesses aren't like that. It's that we're not really managing the client base very well as owners, and we're not setting out what we expect and what the clients need to work with. We're not really painting that vision and the picture of what does good look like at the end of it. Because we're so reactionary and transactional, we're just diving from one thing to another and we're reacting to clients' needs, and we're not slowing down to actually qualify and then take them through a journey of what they need and how they go about actually engaging with you to get the outcome that they want. As soon as you start changing to that, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is where you can leverage the owner-led sales to keep growing and build a bigger base and look at transitioning to having sales people and a team department that then support you as that sort of next layer.
And it's not difficult to think about where to start. If you're an owner selling within your own business and you think, where do I start on this journey? It's not difficult to start. Put yourself in the shoes of the client. Become a client yourself. We're all clients. We all buy things. We've all got preferred suppliers. Why are they my preferred supplier? Is it their product, or is it the service that I get? Is it that when I place my order, I know that I'm going to get it in a timely fashion, and if there's a problem, I'm going to be communicated with? I know that my experience, that customer experience, is the best. And I will deal with suppliers that perhaps their product is not the premium product, but I know exactly what I'm getting from a service perspective. I know if they tell me I'm getting it on Friday, it's coming on Friday. If there's a problem, I'm going to hear about it. And so all of those things, and it's not hard to then go, why do I really like dealing with these suppliers? Make a list and go, how can I make that reflect in my business processes? How do I make my clients feel like this?
And from that very simple start, it's easy to start refining it. Like, what I do from there is then draw out a little map on a whiteboard, in OneNote, whatever, just like Visio, box by box, what are the functions to make that happen? There's your starting point. Then you can refine and improve and get better details, improve system use from there. But you've got to have a picture of what you're working to.
And if you don't want to call yourself a salesperson, that's fine. There's a lot of people who, as you said, sales is a dirty word. It took me a long time to stand up in public and admit that I'm a salesperson because people looked at me strangely, but I'm okay with it now. I rephrased it in my brain. I am helping people. I'm helping people and I'm helping make them happy. And, you know, that's how I approach the sales process. I'm helping people and I'm making them happy.
And the final thought I would leave off, because I'm sure we could talk all day about this topic and we'll feed more out there, but you really got to qualify better. If I was going to put on top of this process, the art that you really need to understand is understand the personalities that you're working with and the right questions to gather information so that you can make a decision. With our reactionary transactional brains that we've built ourselves up to as small business owners, we're just excited to get that potential new business. So we need to flip it to go, how are they going to fit into us? Are they the right fit? Are we the right fit for them? Before we get too excited about the rest of the minutiae. We're a trust-based relationship company and industry, like we've been talking about. A sale's not going to happen too quickly a lot of the time. And if it is happening very quickly, there's usually a lot of red flags in that, from my experience, of something's really going to go wrong. And that's especially the time to start putting on the brakes and asking more questions and getting more buy-in rather than rushing to the proposal, which most of us do. So qualification as a process and a function is a really important thing to spend time and learning on, from my opinion.
I think that could be a whole topic in itself.
I think so.
I've just written a note, the art of saying no. We may have to cover that off another time.
I think so. Well, Great session, Maria.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
We'll do some more, and hopefully everyone's enjoyed this and gotten something out of it, and we'll dive in next time.
That's good. Thank you, James.